Hi, I'm Sheriff Joe McDonald, and I am here with the co-host of Breaking the Cycle, District Attorney Tim Cruz. Our guest today is Vicky Ruvido, Southeastern Senior Regional Manager for Learn to Cope. Thanks for joining us, Vicky.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we've been really fortunate to work with the founder of Learn to Cope, Joanne Peterson, over the years, and also through our Plymouth County Drug Abuse Task Force. And I think that what we've learned, the recovery voice, really is one of the most important things that we can deal with and learn what's going on in that world and bring it into our world and our task force. And so I'm really glad that you're here today to talk about the really important work that you're doing, especially as pertains to grandparents and grandchildren and the problems and how the opioid epidemic is affecting grandparents and grandkids. But before we get to that, can you just tell us, how did Learn to Cope get up and running?
So Learn to Cope began in 2004 by our founder, Joanne Peterson, who was struggling with her loved one, and she didn't have any resources. She didn't know where to turn. And one day she stood up at a microphone and said, "This is happening to me." And one of our state senators was there, and so started Learn to Cope with Joanne and I think 3 other moms in the basement of the Stoughton Police Department. So today, Learn to Cope, our online forum, has 10,300 members. And weekly, we have 25 support meetings throughout Massachusetts, where we see about 600 to 700 people a week. So
that's incredible. I remember I met with Joanne back in 2004, and Ed Jacobs from my office, who was the Director of Preventative Resources, and I had the conversation with her regarding how opioids had affected her son and what was going on in her family. And from there, going to various things and just watching it grow over the years has really been incredible to see how it's really become a national presence and in the voice of the recovery community. So I commend Joanne and all you who work incredibly hard to make sure that we can get the word out and make people aware. But how did you get involved with Learn to Cope, I guess, is the next step?
So I have a loved one. My daughter suffers from substance use disorder, and probably 7.5 years ago, maybe 8 years ago now, I found out she was using opioids, and she lost everything slowly, but with her addiction, she kept losing things, and came to me one day and it said, "Mom, I'm using heroin." And I fell off the couch. It was amazing. I didn't know where to turn, and she went into a detox, and I thought, okay, she'll be fine. She'll be okay. She's going to go detox and get help. And of course, that just started our journey as a family. And she went into her first detox, and I personally fell apart. And my sister had read in the Patriot Ledger, there's this thing called Learn to Cope. You should go to a meeting. And for 6 months, my sister just said, "You have to go." And I said, "What's going to change? Nothing is going to change. Nothing's going to change this feeling of helplessness I have." And she said, "Come on, let's go." So about 6 months later, I walked into my first Learn to Cope meeting in Quincy and was in a room of 40 to 50 people that were in the same situation I was. And through peer interaction and through their experiences, I became educated. I almost felt normal in that room of people, and I was empowered by that education I received to remain healthy myself and to help my daughter in a certain way.
And thanks so much for sharing that story. And I know when I talk to the sheriff, we talk to people who are going through this in their families, that feeling of despair, that feeling of hopelessness and of nowhere to go.
Exactly.
And is there any agency out there that can help me and help my family? And in your situation, it led you to the next step in light of the fact that your daughter had her SUDS, and now you also had to deal with the grandparent situation. So how did you navigate that? So
that, as my daughters sank deeper and deeper into her substance use disorder, she went away from our family. She would disappear for, 8, 9, one time it was 18 months. She never stole from us. She just went away from us, and we couldn't find her. We didn't know, but she was around. We knew through contact she was around somewhere. And then it was Thanksgiving Day of 2012, and we hadn't heard from her for over a year. And my phone dinged. I was literally taking the Thanksgiving turkey out of the oven, and my phone dinged, and it was her saying, "Come pick me up." And you know, I scooted to Route 18 in Abington and picked her up, and she was visibly high and visibly pregnant. And so I didn't know what to do, but I dropped her off at the place she was staying at, and so I knew where she was. And the next day, I didn't even know if the court was open, if Plymouth County Court was open at that point. And the next day, I went to court and had her sectioned. And she was pregnant, and she gave birth that next February to my granddaughter, who I've had custody of since the day she was born. So.
And how old is she now?
She's 5. So my life has changed dramatically. I don't. My retirement looks different. I'll be working for a lot longer than I thought, and I'm raising another child. So.
And you and I were talking off air regarding the number of grandparents that are in that situation. What are those numbers?
We think in Massachusetts there are 35,000 grandparents.
Wow.
That's just an estimate, raising their grandchildren, multiple grandchildren. Nationally, it's about 4.5 million grandparents are raising their grandchildren. And so I was appointed by Governor Baker as a commissioner on the Commission on the Status of Grandparents Raising Grandchildren. And we're trying to get together some funds. We're trying to appropriate some funds to do a study across all state agencies to get that number solid, to find out how many of us are raising our grandchildren and what the needs of grandparents are today. And what the needs of those grandchildren are today, because many of them are traumatized kids. And I know your office works directly with traumatized kids, so it's huge. There's many layers of substance use disorder, and the family is affected by so many different things. And at Learn to Cope, it was a natural progression. I remember being at our Quincy meeting and asking one day, how many here are worried about their grandchildren, or how many have custody of the grandchildren? And at our Quincy meeting of about 25 people, 7 different members raised their hand. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is huge. So as I went around to my meetings, I would ask the same question, and many hands would go up.
That's an important point that you make as well. I know a lot of people in your situation may be aware of this, but I would suspect that there are a lot of people in similar circumstances that are not aware of that there's so many other people going through the same thing. So I think that's one of the great things that you're able to do by coming on the show with Tim and myself. And I can't say how much I appreciate that. And God bless you for what you're doing.
You.
There's no more important person to a grandchild than a grandparent.
I feel like I'm the one that's blessed. She looks just like my daughter. She's got big blue eyes, and she looks at me, she calls me Nani, and she looks at me every day and tells me she loves me, and that's my my hope, because that's what we peddle at Learn to Cope, is the hope in our situations that our kids will get better, our loved ones will get better. And it's my greatest hope that my daughter finds recovery, long-term recovery, and she can be a part of her daughter's life again, because my daughter's a wonderful person. And she has a disease, and so I'm the blessed one, because Abigail is just beautiful. So.
Well, I think 2 very strong factors in her eventual recovery, please God, her eventual recovery is going to be the fact that you've been so steadfast and so good about this, and the fact that her daughter is there waiting for her.
We're waiting. That's what I tell her. We're waiting for you. So, yeah.
Do you notice in your role as now as the custodian of your granddaughter, are there specific challenges that grandparents face that a regular parent would not face? And if so, can you explain them for us?
Well, if you can imagine, financial obstacles, emotional obstacles, the stigma, especially for grandparents. As a parent of a child with substance use disorder, the stigma was pretty heavy. It's, when your child is sick, there's the old casserole adage that if your child had cancer or something, your neighbor would bring over a casserole. But you won't even talk about your kid that has substance use disorder. We just don't talk about that in our society. So The stigma is amazing, and especially for grandparents, where we're older, we tend not to talk about things. We keep it in the family. And at Learn to Cope and at the Commission, we're here to say, please talk about it, please open up, and we're here to help you.
And the commission that you're on, that gives you a voice on behalf of many grandparents here, that you can get to our state legislators, our state senators, our governor.
Yeah.
And how is that going? And how, when you're actually, because you're involved in it, and you're actually there living it every day.
Exactly.
And you have the opportunity to voice what's happening to you and happening to thousands of other grandparents who find themselves in similar situations. How do you go about that? So
I've been to 3 commission meetings so far. So I, easing myself in, but most of us are grandparents raising grandchildren. And then we have the, the state representatives there, somebody from the AG's office, and we're from a cross section of all kinds of occupations. And so my ears are open. I listen to grandparents. At Learn to Cope, we've established the Grandparents' Corner to give voice to our members who are now raising their grandchildren. So I take what's going on at the Grandparents' Corner and what I hear at meetings to the Commission and apply it there. So, getting the funding for a study, data, as we all know, through the wonderful Plymouth County outreach, data drives everything. And so if we get the appropriation for the study that we need to do, then we can go after some funds to help grandparents raising grandchildren. And
what do the grandparents specifically need in your experience right now?
Legal help. They need, they have housing issues. Can you imagine being in estate housing and thinking you're okay, and then all of a sudden you get DCF calls and says, here's your grandchild, and then your housing is, questioned. If you're in an over 55 community, what are you going to do then? If you're, you buy your retirement condo in an over 55 community, they don't allow children. What do you do about insurance? So there are a lot of financial issues that grandparents face. Yeah.
It's great to hear about the work on the commission and stuff. I know you talk of also the challenges that we find in our community right now. And I think one of the things that we all work with, the sheriff works with, we work with, are dealing with, unfortunately, the drug endangered kids right now, which is really kind of the next step. I know we found out in our office many years back of the kids who were traumatized from witnessing domestic violence or child abuse, and now we've worked with those. We've gotten grants for schools, making them trauma sensitive. We've seen some incredible numbers in some of the schools and the helping of the children, so that avoids that. But what we're concerned of, and I know you are, and I know the sheriff and the governor is the next level of kids who are potentially going to be growing up without a grandparent like you, perhaps, or perhaps they end up in a foster home or something along those lines because their parents can't take care of them. And that whole level of drug endangered kids is really challenging. And I think that's why we need to have voices that refused not to be heard. And that's why having your voice on the commission, I think, will make a difference. And I'm hopeful that, in a year or two from now, some of the things that we need to have changed will be changed.
I hope so.
And that we're going to be in a position to help the kids as best as we can and prevent them from going down the same path as other ones.
Exactly.
I know the sheriff is a proponent of a lot of education for our kids. Preventative end of it, that's really the task force that he'll deal in Plymouth County. We're incredibly lucky to have all of our police departments working together, talking, communicating, and also the data that you're talking about, getting that data, finding out where these overdoses are occurring, helping us as prosecutors go after the people who are not using the drugs but are dealing it and making money on the backs of our loved ones, and also helping the people who are in the middle through our drug courts or our diversion programs, wherever they are. It's a significant issue, and I think that it's hit all of us really hard and quickly. And so that's why I'm glad that that you're here and the Learn to Cope's here, and the many different groups that we're working with, trying to together get in front of this challenge.
Absolutely.
And it's great that you come on the show here with us, because I know that there are people who are going to see this who may find themselves in similar circumstances and not having known where to turn. We'll have a good idea going forward. That, you know, first off, that there are people who are dealing with those issues, and there are people there to help. So thank you for that. One of the things that you had mentioned earlier was that you had sectioned your daughter. You know, could you talk a little bit about that Section 35? You know, for the viewers who are unaware, Section 35 is a petition through the courts that that when you have a family member, a loved one, who is in imminent danger by virtue of these issues, that you can go and have them committed for treatment. Now, you had to do that, and it's a fairly extreme and probably a difficult decision to have to make.
It is.
Tell us a little bit about that.
I will. The first time I had my daughter sectioned was extremely difficult, and if I could just mention going to learn to cope. If you are a first-time member at Learn to Cope, you'll come and you'll get a family packet, and in this packet it tells us how to section 35, what the process is, and so the first time I sectioned my daughter, I saved her life. I absolutely saved her life. The second time I sectioned my daughter, I saved her life, and I saved my granddaughter's life because she was pregnant. So, so when she was civilly committed to the Women's Addiction Treatment Center, she was there for 28 days. So I knew in those 28 days that she was safe, and that my granddaughter was safe also, and that she received, you know, care.
Certainly,
of course, she
appropriate
was
care.
Taken right to the hospital. She received great care. And in total, I've sectioned my daughter 5 times. And each time I've sectioned her, it's a huge decision for the family to do this. But seeing my daughter and seeing how emaciated she was and how deep into her substance use she was, I believe in my heart that I saved her life every single time.
Probably did.
Yeah.
I know that the foes of, you know, say this, it doesn't work, but I remember hearing Dr. Kelly from Mass General Hospital saying any little break in substance use, even if it's, you know, 14 days, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, it all adds up in that person's brain, and helping that brain to heal, and that person will get tools during their, you know, civil commitment that maybe they can use later on. So I do believe in sectioning. It's a tool that we parents can use, and so.
I couldn't agree more. I have no doubt, not even knowing the particulars of your situation until you told us, that you did save your daughter's life multiple times, and likely your granddaughter's as well. Having been a prosecutor myself and spent a lot of time in court, I would see that virtually every day. It's so good that you can come and talk about this, because there are people out there that may not know that these things exist. From a technical standpoint, it's Chapter 123 of the Massachusetts General Laws, and Section 35 allows you to come in, as you had correctly stated, and if your loved one is in danger, imminent danger, you can have them involuntarily committed for that drug treatment for up to 90 days. What's so important about that is, if you are in doubt about your decision, you make that decision, and the court will bring in a clinician who will come and will talk to your loved one, will get their story, will assess them physically, and they'll have counsel. A lawyer will be there on behalf of your loved one, and a judge is going to make that ultimate determination. So it's not simply, and this is important for the people at home to know, that someone is not being involuntarily committed simply because you say so. It is your fear and worry that is backed up by a clinician and the decision of a judge after a legal process. So it's not like this is out of the blue. So I think it is important. Lives are being saved here, and as you correctly point out, I know that there's many critics out there that say that mandatory or forced treatment isn't going to work. But the bottom line, with me anyway, is you've got to survive to get the treatment to work at some point in that cycle. And every little break, as you correctly point out, is a possibility. There is hope there. There is. There is hope. I have hope. So thank you.
And I know the sheriff knows. I mean, unfortunately, in our county, the biggest detox is really the jail, and and when you end up seeing parents who are glad that their child is safe down the jail versus being unknown.
Right.
Don't know where they are, don't know what they're doing, don't know if they're going to get a call in the middle of the night. And that for them to be there sometime is a good thing, and they have so many great programs down at the jail trying to help the men down there to turn it around. I know they also in Framingham and South Bay, they have programs also trying to get in front of these issues. And as you know, programs don't always take.
No.
Not the first time, the second time, the third time. And Learn to Cope understands that also.
Right.
That it is a challenge, but I think that what Learn to Cope brings to our community is probably a couple things. One of them, it helps remove that stigma by talking to people.
Exactly.
Stigma is still an incredible problem, but I think the most important thing it brings is hope for people to realize that you're not in it alone, that there is hope out there, and that you have to persevere with it. And that's why I commend you and everybody that's in that difficult and challenging situation, because opiate crisis has affected everybody. Everybody knows somebody, and that's why the stigma needs to go. We need to help the people that we can help. We need to make sure we pursue the individuals who are peddling poison, and we have to get to our kids at a younger age. And that, to me, is a plan for success down the road, dealing with the problems that we have right now, which are many, but are less than what they were a couple years ago. I firmly believe we've made strides, and sometimes it's one step up and two steps back.
It is.
But it's still strides, and we're going in the right direction.
Prevention is the key.
Yeah, we trend in the right direction, and we keep fighting.
Exactly.
It's the name of the show, Break the Cycle, and that's what it is. It's not an on-off switch, and we will keep at it.
At Learn to Cope, but every other week at each of our meetings, we'll have a person in long-term recovery come and speak to our loved ones, our family members, to give them hope. And these are people that have been in recovery for many years, and they tell their story. And it's hard for them to get up in front of a group of mums and dads and sisters and brothers and aunts and uncles and grandparents and tell their story. It's cathartic for them too. And but they give us such hope that it's truly amazing. And one person said to me, we were talking about after you section your child, and if your child ends up, my daughter ended up in Framingham. They don't do that anymore, but she ended up in Framingham once, and I was just out of my mind that she was in Framingham State Prison, and I did this to her. And I remember one of our people in long-term recovery said, well, I was in jail for a felony conviction, and I met a person in there that changed my life. He said, and it was because I was in jail. Who would have thunk that I would meet that person that put the spark in me? And so,
you've said something that a peeve of mine that we have right now is the fact that sometimes people have to go to jail to receive this treatment. And Tim correctly points out that we in corrections, in the correctional system, are the largest providers of mental health services and detox and drug treatment services. So I think what we need to do here, and this will go a long way, I think, to helping us remove that stigma. Let's divert these people before they have to go to a correctional facility. Let's enhance the public health response. Let's get Health and Human Services. Let's get Department of Public Health involved.
I know.
I think it's very, very important.
I agree with you. I don't think it should be a policing effort. It should be. It's a public health.
Nor do the police.
Exactly.
But you know what though? But it's done, and here we're really lucky in our county to have a lot of really good people who are working really hard. And between Plymouth County Outreach and Plymouth County Hope and the task force, everybody working together, sharing information. We understand that sometimes that the law enforcement people really are the only line of hope sometimes or help that can happen at the scene, and trying to make sure that we can provide information, provide help, and also at the same time get information. Like you said, the data collection really is something that's important for the purposes of future grants. It's important for get administrative help. It's important to get more resources to buy Narcan. All the trainings that occur many times are all not state funded.
No.
And we need to raise the money to get that sort of things out there.
I noticed, Vicky, you brought a lot of stuff, and Tim brings up the Narcan. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And
so Narcan, we're a Department of Public Health pilot site to train the layperson to administer Narcan. So at any Learn to Cope meeting, At all 25 meetings, there will be a Narcan trainer there. It's an anonymous training. You do have to fill out a little form and provide your non-identifying information, and you will be trained. The training takes about 20 minutes, and you will leave, learn to cope with a free 2 doses of Narcan, free of charge, and each one is 4 milligrams. So that's another thing that Learn to Cope does, is you can hopefully, if you're a new family to Learn to Cope, please ask about Narcan, and we will train you that night, and you will leave with 2 doses. It's so important. And I carry Narcan with me everywhere I go. And I was in a department store, and somebody said, somebody's overdosing in the bathroom. And it happened to be at a big shopping plaza, and I didn't have my bag with me. I just had my little fanny pack on, and I reached and I said, "Oh my God, I don't have my Narcan." But the police were stationed there anyway, and they got to the person and saved his life. But we've had a save. Learn to Cope has had a save in a courtroom. A parent was there sectioning their child, and somebody overdosed in the courtroom, and they saved their lives with their Learn to Cope Narcan.
I heard that story.
Yeah,
I did.
So yeah. Anyway, and a parent just used last week. They did a report back. We asked that if you use your Narcan to please report back to us, and she had 2. She obtained one at her pharmacy, and she got one at Learn to Cope, and it took all doses to revive her child. So she saved her child's life.
Yeah, oftentimes it does take multiple
Right.
multiple doses. Yeah.
It does. So.
And there's some pamphlets I see.
There are. So you know, if you come to a Learn to Cope meeting, you'll also get our pamphlet that has all of our 25 meetings all over Massachusetts. And we also make up this pamphlet of grief groups, because unfortunately we lose a lot of our loved ones. And this is our Coping Today pamphlet, which lists a whole bunch of grief support groups all over the state of Massachusetts. So.
Excellent, Vicki. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for watching us, and thank you, Vicki, for everything that you and the folks at Learn to Cope are doing. You are saving lives, and we're so grateful for that. Our time is coming to a close. We would certainly love to have you come back again.
I would love
to report on any statistics that we've gotten, the great work you're doing. So thanks for being with us today. To all the viewers, thanks for tuning in, and stay safe, everybody. Thank you.